Welcome to Advanced Reports, Harnessing the Power of Your Data with me, Leah Brach. So after today's session, you can expect to know more about the advanced report features that are not covered in our introduction to building report sessions, things like being able to add columns, create OR filters, aggregate those report columns, build charts and graphs, and add those to your homepage. And hopefully after today's session, you feel more empowered to utilize those advanced report features and make data more accessible to your users. So we're going to jump right in to LegalServer, and we're going to start by getting into the edit mode of one of our reports. So when we're looking at our list of reports in my site here, we're going to go ahead and find the report we want to work with, click this pencil icon to get into that edit mode. And the first thing we're going to actually walk through together today is just a bit of more about adding columns to a report. So of course we talk about adding columns to reports in our introduction sessions, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into advanced add columns here today. So our advanced add columns, if we click into that, is going to give us this pop-up of method 1 and method 2, and we're really going to be focusing on method 2 for this. So method 2, you might be familiar with, is a way that we can add a new column to a report, so adding a new data point to a report. And the thing I want to really focus on is just the structure of method 2. So we have subtables, we have fields under those subtables, and how do we drill down in to find the data we want to add to this report? So one important thing to point out is that we do have a whole page dedicated on our help site, which is help.legalserver.org, specifically to finding things through method 2. It is this page here called Report Nuggets. And for example, if we click into the addresses section, we can see the paths for adding address information, like county of residence up at the top here. So I highly recommend bookmarking this page, having it available, so that you can reference it and more easily find things through method 2. The other reason I wanted to circle back to adding a column to a report to method 2 here is just to highlight a really common thing that happens with report builders using method 2, where you end up with a column that looks like the right column, but the data is not right. And this will happen with lookup fields. So let's say that we want to add a lookup field to this report of the gender field. And I happen to know that the gender field is going to live under our person subtable. That's where we got a lot of information like demographic information and contact information about the client. So I'm going to open up that person subtable and I'm going to check and see if the field is just right under fields. I'm going to search for gender and I'm going to find it. And you'll notice this lookup in square brackets after the field name. That should be a red flag to you. That should signal to you that you actually do not want to add the field from here. But we're going to go ahead and do the wrong thing just to show you what it will look like. So I'm going to click and add that field to my report, that column. Then we're going to just X out of our pop-up, we'll refresh, and I see we've added a column. But again, the values just don't look quite right. Those do not look like the gender values that I have in my lookup of male and female and other types of gender values. Instead, I'm getting these ID numbers that mean nothing to me. So that is your second red flag that you have added the wrong column. And really, it's the column is added from the wrong place, I should say. So we're going to go back to advanced add columns. We're going to open up our person subtable again. And this time, instead of going directly to fields, what I now know is that my column, my field needs a subtable, its own subtable, and every lookup will. So even though we're under a subtable, the person subtable, I've got to open that up, find our gender subtable specifically, add that to our report, open up the fields from that, and now I can go ahead and add that gender column. Then we'll go ahead and X out of our pop-up, refresh, And now we have a gender column that's looking a lot more like we're used to, a lot more like we were expecting. And of course, I can go ahead and just delete that one that was giving us those ID numbers. So anytime that you're working with a report, you're adding a new column, it's a lookup field. That, again, is one of the most common things that happen is we forget that we need a specific subtable. So just go up a row, add a subtable. It's almost always named the same as the field. So you might have noticed our subtable was called gender lookup, just like that field was. But again, the field underneath it is just called gender, and that's the one that we are after. So that was just a bit about adding some columns through method 2 and one of the tricks that you might run into there. So the next thing we're going to walk through is aggregation. And we want to talk about how to limit the aggravation that you're feeling with reports by using aggregation. And that aggravation that you might have come across is typically in the form of looking at a report and wanting to have one row per case so we can do some counts on that report, but instead being met with more than one row per case. So that is where aggregation comes in. If we aggregate down some columns, we can get our report back to one row per case. And if this hasn't happened to you before, you might be wondering, why would I ever get more than one row per case? And the answer is typically because we've added something to the report that has a more than one relationship to your case. So things like pro bono attorney name. We all know that we can have more than one pro bono attorney assigned to a case. So if we add that column and a case is assigned to 3 different pro bono attorneys, they're going to show up 3 times, that case. It's going to show in 3 different rows. By the way, 2 easy ways to know if this is part of your report, if you have something on the report that's more than one row per case. Number 1 is just click this unique count under your database, matter case ID column. And that will give you the unique count, how many unique cases are showing up in this report. And obviously for our report here, we don't have that many results. I can pretty easily just kind of look through the list and see we don't have any duplicate case IDs. But this is very useful if you've got hundreds or thousands of cases in a report. So if I can match this number to our row count above, I know I have 1 row per case. The second way, by the way, to know if you have any of this going on in your report is to go back to Advanced Add Columns. And under method 2, open up your subtables and see if you have any that say 1 row per. So for instance, if I'm searching in our subtables, I can find non-adverse party family members, 1 row per party. Or if we search for time slips, 1 row, or sometimes say multiple row per case. So anytime you see that, again, should be kind of a flag to you that could create more than 1 row per case. Won't necessarily, it all depends on your data, of course, but you have the potential there of creating more than 1 row per case. So for our example, we're actually going to go ahead and add our adverse parties, 1 row per party, to our subtables here. Underneath there, we want to go ahead and add a person subtable. We just want to add our adverse party name. So we're going to drill down into that through our person subtable. And we'll just go ahead and add that full name column. Of course, we could add other information about our adverse parties as well if we wanted to. But we'll keep it simple for now. We'll X out of our pop-up, refresh. And now I have my adverse party name column. And by the way, a lot of times when you're down under a subtable, adding fields from there, sometimes it won't give you the best name. You don't get really that full field name, if you will. It's just the name of the field within the database. So for this example in particular, I would definitely recommend coming in here, updating the header there, and making it just something a little bit more obvious. But more importantly, once we've added that column, I now see that my unique count does not match my row count. I have 2 extra rows on top of just, 1 per case with those 12 cases. And I can pretty easily see that it is this case here, our Test Tuesday case, that is now showing up 3 times. So same exact case, every row, every column is the same, except for our adverse party name column. And that, again, tells me that that is the column we're going to have to aggregate. If, of course, we want it to be 1 row per case. Sometimes you want to leave it this way. All depends on what you're using that report for. But in our instance, we want to go ahead and get it back to 1 row per case. So what I'm going to do is edit that column. And I want to select something here for this aggregate. And there's a couple of different options. I will say almost always I end up using a text join. That's going to just join all of the text data together. So in this case, it's going to put all 3 of those adverse party names in 1 row and 1 column just separated by commas, which is, again, typically what we're going to want. Now, you do also have other options like min and max. So if you're wanting to show the most recent time slip or the first time slip, those can be useful as well for something like a date of that time slip. But again, for our instance, and I would say the majority, we're going to want to go ahead and do a text join. So we select that, we click apply and refresh. And now, just as described, you'll see that we now have all of those names in that 1 row, and we're back to 12 rows in total. So that, of course, was a pretty simple example. You have the option to aggregate any column that you've added to your report. So if you're adding multiple things to a report, like adverse parties and non-adverse parties, family members, or pro bono attorneys, again, there might be multiple columns that you're having to go in and aggregate. The last thing I'll say there about aggregation is that sometimes you have some things hiding under the hidden column section that also need to be aggregated. So if you're ever aggregating a report and you thought, you captured all of the ones that you needed, you set the text join for adverse party name and all of the other ones that you saw here, but it's still not giving you 1 row per case, always check this hidden column section. A lot of times, depending on the table, the subtable that we've added to the report, we can get extra database ID type fields that will pop up connected to that subtable. So a lot of times we have to go in and aggregate that extra database ID column as well. So again, just keep an eye out on that and make sure you're getting everything that you need aggregated that's coming from those 1 row per subtables. And I'll probably shout this out again, but keep in mind that if you ever get stuck on trying to aggregate down a report, it can definitely be a tricky process. We have a report-focused office hour every single week with Ron Wilhoit. So definitely come join us for those if, again, you're having any issues or getting stuck on trying to aggregate something. We can always help out with those things. All right, so the next thing that I want to go ahead and get into for this session here is to talk about OR filters on reports. And this is actually something that has just recently been updated a bit. So the functionality is really the same, but we've updated kind of the look and how you set these up. So if we're editing the report, we open up our filters section. You'll notice this new Add Group button. So if you've been working with reports for a long time, you may be familiar with the old way of creating those OR filters, which was just to drag 2 filters together. And they would just create their own little grouping, and then we could set it as an OR versus an AND. Just like you've got this button up at the top. So, the default is that filters are always going to be cumulative. They're going to be an AND join. Technically, you could turn this into an OR join for the entire report for all of the filters if you wanted to. But again, you also have a way of just creating those OR groupings. So the purpose of this, by the way, would be, for example, if you want this report to pull out any closed or open cases that were opened in the previous year, where let's say the assigned office is our main office or the assigned program is general. We want to catch any of those cases that match either of those things. So if we were to apply both of those right now, if I were just to apply the assigned office to the main office and apply the assigned program to our general program, that is currently just under that and filter, that main and join. So we're only going to get these 5 cases where both of those things are true. But if I click add group and I drag those 2 filters under that group, which by the way can be a little bit tricky, so I'll try to have it happen in the wrong way so you can see it. So if I first just drag this filter under that grouping, you'll notice this. So the first one was correct, but the second one is actually just under the main join. It's not under that group. If that happens to you, just kind of wiggle it a little bit to the right, and then it should go under that grouping. Now that they're in the same group, we can click that and, make it an or, and now we have 12 cases showing up, because if they're not in the main office, they are in the general program. So again, it's catching both of those where either or both of those values are true. Keep in mind, you can build as many or joins as you want, as many groupings as you want, and there can be as many columns or filters, I should say, as part of each grouping. So if we wanted to also, say, or the funding code could be X, again, we can have as many things under that group as we want to. We'll go ahead and just ungroup those and get rid of our default values so we just get more results back in our report, a little bit easier to work with there. There we go. So the last big thing that we're going to walk through together today is how we can build charts and graphs with reports. So if you've run reports in LegalServer, you may have noticed that there are the options to add things like pie charts and bar charts and stacked bar charts and crosstabs and summations to really visualize the data that that report is giving us. If we open up this additional display format section, you can see all of those various options. And the first thing we want to do when we're talking about adding a chart or a graph to the report, for most of these, we're going to need a numerical value to count. And I say most of these because crosstabs don't actually need this. They can just count the database ID column. But for most of them, again, pie charts and summations and all of the others, we're going to need a field, a column, to count. So that is our first step. And to add that column, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Advanced Add Columns, Method 2. We're going to open up the fields directly, not under any other subtables. And we're going to add the very first option, New Literal Numeric Field. So we're just going to click that. We're going to X out of our pop-up and refresh. And we have to make this into a count field that's giving us 1 per case, 1 per row. So for that, what we're going to do is edit this. And in the expression, we're going to put a 1. Apply and refresh. And now we've got that 1 for every single row. So again, that is just how we're going to count these. Oftentimes, it's helpful to also update the name. So if you want to, you can name this, case counts or row count, anything that makes sense to you. And now we're going to be able to use that when, again, we're building charts, graphs, etc. So let's start with just a summation. And a summation is just going to give you the totals for a column. I will mention that you can also get totals for most columns just with this B, the breakdown. So if we want a simpler way, again, for most columns, it works just fine to click that B. Users will scroll down here when running the report to see those totals. But we can also add a summation to get more of a chart view of those as well. So we'll go ahead and click to add a summation. We're going to edit it so we can actually give it some data. And what we want to do is set the row source as whatever we're wanting to count. So let's say we want to know how many cases per, let's say, assigned office. And then our source is going to be that field that we just created to count, the one that we just renamed to row count. And then we'll apply and refresh. And there we have our summation. So you can see here matching our row count for the total, and we can see a breakdown of how many cases per office. And of course, keep in mind, you can have as many of these as you'd like. So you could also have a summation based on assigned program, a summation based on the primary advocate, based on the gender values of the cases, whatever, again, you might want to see those numbers for. Kind of similarly, our next example is going to be building a pie chart. So if we pop into create a pie chart, click to edit that. Our wedge size is going to be that row count again. The label is going to be whatever we want to show in that pie chart. So let's say we want to show this time our program value. Actually, let's go with primary advocate. Apply and refresh. I didn't actually give it a name, but we can. And we've got our pie chart. And sometimes it comes out a little tiny, but you can drag and make it a bit bigger there as well. And one thing to highlight about pie charts versus summations that can be handy is that if you hover over a wedge, it's going to give you not only the value, but also the percentage. So I can see for these 12 cases, LegalServer staff has 6 of them, which is 50% of the cases. The last one that we'll build together today, and I will highlight that all of these are on the help site, all of the specifics are on the help site. What does this, option or setting mean? What should I put in here? What should I select here? All of that's written down. But the last one we'll do together today is a crosstab. That one's a little bit different because it involves 2 data points. So a summation or a pie chart is just showing us really totals for one thing. But a crosstab can show us that kind of relationship between 2 different columns. So for instance, we could do office and program here. Our column source is going to be whatever you want in the columns. So down, up and down. So we'll say we want office there. The rows is going to be whatever we want in the other direction as rows, whatever we're kind of comparing to the office. So we'll say program. And then again, the source is going to be, could be just the database ID. Our row count would work as well. But again, crosstabs don't really need that special field. And then apply and refresh. And we have, oh, sorry about that. Let's start over. I did not save my changes. Okay. So let's start over on the summations. So we're going to add a crosstab. We're going to click into our crosstab. Okay. And now it's showing up here. Sorry about that. So we have added our crosstab here, and we can see again how it's showing us the values for both of those columns. So we see assigned program, assigned office, and again, how many for each. So we see there's 8 total in the general program. How many of those are in the main office? Can easily see that is 5. So again, crosstabs are great for seeing that relationship between 2 different fields that are in your report. So that is a bit of information about how to build charts and graphs within our reports in LegalServer. And the last thing we're going to do together today is just take a peek at how we would add those charts and graphs, or even just the regular report output, to a homepage, or really throughout the site, wherever we want to visualize this data. So I'm going to head over to my homepage. And we're going to scroll down and see if we have, it looks like we do have one embedded report on here that's showing us just that report output. As I mentioned, that's an option as well. That's typically a great option if you're wanting to replace a list view. So anytime you have a list view in LegalServer that's not giving you all the data you want, maybe you want to include a custom field that you've started collecting, or just any field that isn't part of that list view. If you've worked with list views, you know that there's some options for showing or hiding different columns and filters, but you can't add extra things to them. So what you can do, build it as a report, put whatever you want in that report, and then embed it and show it like this. On the edit mode of this profile, so if we go up to our little admin edit profile, I can see that this is coming from this block called report part. So the report part block is what's going to give us that embedded report view. We're going to go ahead and add another one. And when you're adding a new report part block, the first thing to do is to select the report that you're wanting to use. And keep in mind that it is only going to search your base reports. So if you have built something as a saved report, you're not going to be able to find it and select it here. Now, if you are a report builder, you can go to that saved report, save as, make it into a base report, or I should say copy it into a new base report, and then it would be available here. But keep in mind, again, if you're searching for something that's a saved report, it's not going to show up. So we just start to type in the name of our report. And I have lots of basic case reports. But we will try this one. Oh, that's not going to work for us. Let me just pop back to our report quickly here. Basic cases report. Aha, I was missing the cases. There we go. So now I can see, it looks like I didn't fully save that report, but we at least have our summation. So I can see any of those display formats that I've built into that particular report. So every time you'll see tabular data, again, that's just kind of the rows of data you see at the bottom of a report. But if we have built pie charts, summation, crosstabs, we would see those here as well. So we'll say we want to see our office summation. This show view link is, do you want to link to the report? So an easy way to actually go to run the report. And then things like, what do you want the width percentage? Do you want it to have header text? Do you want it to display your column totals? Do you want to display filters and allow changes to those filters? So you have quite a few options for kind of how flexible you want this embedded report to be. Is it really just showing them data, or is it allowing them to kind of manipulate the data as they see it? And then once we hit continue, and we scroll all the way back to the bottom of our home page here, we're going to see our new embedded report. And again, this is that link. We checked that option. So it gives me a link to go and run the report right from there. If I go back and I add those filter options, so if we go back to editing the profile, we open that block back up and I say we do want to display the filters and allow changes. Just want to show you what that will look like. So that's going to give us this section here. So I could say, well, I actually want to know about all of the open and closed cases that were opened this year versus last year and update that date range. We don't have any yet for this year, so we'll go back to last year. But you'll also notice I can adjust and show the rest of our filters. I could pop in here and say, just show me ones from a certain program, or again, kind of whatever I want to do with the filters from there. So those are some basics for embedding reports on your homepage, or as I mentioned, really throughout your site, wherever you want to see those quick metrics. I also mentioned they can be a great replacement for list views on things like your case profile. So definitely keep that in mind.